The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
This is News Talk.
Well, as the dust settles on Saturday at Croke Park, Conor McKeown and Declan Bogue on what went wrong for Dublin and just how likely they are to rebound right back next year. Damien Delaney will join us on the football show, and we'll be talking Irish basketball as well. Very successful few days on the international front. Kieran Shannon of the Examiner with us, and the Irish men's captain Jason McClean will join us as well. And we'll hear from the Dublin football manager Mick Bowen. They have an All-Ireland final once again, this time against Meath coming up. 53106 the text number. We're at Off the Ball on Twitter. Richie McCormack, hello to you.
How are you, Joe?
And Dan McDonnell, evening, of the Irish Independent, hello.
Evening, Joe. Richie.
So we're going to talk some basketball this hour. Not something we always do, one of those sports that probably doesn't get enough coverage, but there was some Irish success over the weekend for the Irish men's team. They won the FIBA European Championship for Small Countries. Yes, that is the actual name. The marketing department might want to think about some more imagination there. A bit literal, but they did win the European Championship for Small Countries, and this was the first time this had happened since 1994. So Kieran Shannon's going to join us, and Jason McClean as well. That is all on the way. We will have Conor McKeown with us, man immersed in Dublin, GAA journalist with the Irish Independent, GAA journalist, and Declan Bogue as well, GAA writer, after 8 o'clock. Dan McDonnell, you looked on as the empire crumbled in very dramatic fashion.
Yeah, I'm sort of glad I sort of had it on, because it was obviously Norwich Liverpool was on Saturday as well, and just following the social media world, everyone was saying at half time this was one of the most boring games of all time. This is I could feel like as someone who sort of just dips in and out for like a couple of the big games every year, I feel like these death of Gaelic football pieces were about to be penned again and discussed as a topic again. But then this epic came out of nowhere, really, to be honest. And I mean, I was sort of compelled, but I think it was you'd have tweeted at Mayo or Box Office, and they sort of are, really, aren't they? It's very hard not to be engaged by that story, and the Dublin Empire crumbling, which there were so many angles to it, it seemed, so much going on with it.
Yeah,
so I'm interested to hear what Conor and co say about what it means for the future.
Yeah, well, I know Conor's definitely of the sense that there isn't the same calibre of player coming through, but I just find it hard to believe that they won't have still about the best squad by some distance in the country pretty much every year. Richie, if I was to say to you, life dependent on it, odds the same for everybody, who wins the All-Ireland next year? Who are you going for?
I would have been, before Saturday unfolded the way it did, I would have been very much on the side of Dublin winning another 3 or 4 out of the next 5. But now, I'm after taking 1 or 2 off of that, because it's become quite evident that the depth of talent isn't there. But they do have a huge pool from which to draw over the course of the next 3-4 years, as Desi Farrell essentially looks to restock the shelves. Because I think Kieran Cunningham tweeted out yesterday, it's like 15 players they're all really good, really decent players over the course of the last 2 years, for one reason or another, have decided to walk away. That's not easy to replace. But it is just a matter, I would imagine, of getting games and getting legs and getting the right type of game plan in place for those players, because the raw materials from a Dublin perspective are certainly there for them to bounce back pretty quickly, I'd imagine.
I would think so too. I'd probably, gun to my head, probably say, God, if my life depends on it, probably Dublin. They're about my best bet. And a few said, well, the conveyor belt is slowing down at minor level and under 20 level, but I was just looking through, Dublin at minor level, I mean, this being the most successful century in Dublin history, obviously, as that you can imagine. So how many minor All-Irelands have Dublin won this century? 1, 2012. The one before that was 1984. So that's completely irrelevant. And then under 20 level, they did win in under 20 in 2010, 12 and 14. Bit of a gap to 17. And okay, they're now a 4-year gap and counting, but they have been in the finals of 2019 and 2020. So I find it hard to believe that Desi is going to be going to, junior B matches, just searching for a diamond in the rough there. I feel like there's going to be someone at his disposal. So I still would be pretty confident that they'll muster up an unbelievably angry challenge next year, I would think. It strikes me as well, Dan, a little bit, you're following Alex Ferguson, you're following Joe Schmidt, you're following Matt Busby. Farrell kind of came in, and you remember Moyes tore up the script a bit and got rid of all the old staff and started changing how we do things around here and played in a different way, and players really didn't like it. Farrell, you could argue, had the good sense to come in and not change too much, and they won the 2020 All-Ireland almost. Muscle memory kicked in and Kerry got knocked out early and Donegal didn't come through in Ulster the way everyone expected, and probably difficult enough to rip up the plan. And now, interestingly, next year it does give him licence to say, well, the old template has let us down at last, now it's time for Desi's plan.
Yeah, and correct me here, it's not going to be all just straight knockout next year, right? We'll be back to a normal length championship, so you might have a bit of Super 8 stuff going on.
And he'll have the league to, proper league campaign to implement some ideas,
Like, it just struck me from the outside, like, to me, when you define something as the end of an era, it's not if you lose a really, like, tight semi-final that, in reality, a couple of things going their way, they're in the final and they might win it. End of an era stuff is when you get, dumped out by someone who shouldn't be touching you at all, and it's sort of absolute chaos, and it doesn't, maybe by their standards, this is a version of chaos. And I mean, I was listening to some of your stuff, was it Pillar Caffrey over the weekend, maybe talking about maybe had some standards dropped in some way. Yeah. And I don't know, I can't say that, but it strikes me as like, just to be a bit premature, and presumably as well, like, it's really hard to follow, and you maybe the like any manager at any level, like, who's successful, by the end that they go, they leave a dressing room that's probably purring, that's working, and you think that will carry you for a while, but I don't know. You go back to the point about the conveyor belt coming through, maybe not being as quick as it should be, or not as voluminous in terms of quality. But isn't the argument that some people would make, and I know some Dublin fans hate it, that these players will come into this brilliant setup now with sort of superb resources and presumably, like, they can improve. It's not as if your fate is predetermined by the quality of one crop of players. If you can get, if they're based in Dublin, they don't have to travel home to train, like bring players from other counties, who have to commute and deal with other aspects of life that come with being an amateur sport, then presumably over time that's going to be a challenge faced by someone like that Offaly team, that the real life catches up with them in the context of their sport. So people don't like saying it, but my favourite part of the reaction to Dublin losing over the weekend is the tranche of Dublin fans who are saying, well, there you go, you were talking about splitting us up. I mean, we lost, so you can't split us up. So they can go and win the next 4 now, but they can say, well, we did lose that one a couple of years ago. And it just feels like there was people dying to say that. But maybe this puts that nonsense to bed now. I think if they win the next one and they've won 7 out of 8, I'm not sure if that domination debate goes away or whatever it is, as whatever the stat proves to be over a period of time. But there was that sort of small sense of semi-joy in some aspects of, in joy and defeat that could be taken from it.
Can't split us up now, they said.
Can't touch us now, yeah.
So we have Conor McCone and Declan Bogue on the way after 8 o'clock. By the way, just before we get into the Newsround, if you're talking, Dan, about things blowing up on Twitter, I mean, last night I was going about my business and then Twitter lost its mind. And you wouldn't think the British Open in Leicester would be the sporting event that, I think you said there'll be a documentary about this. And that is the one. If there's going to be a documentary made about this week, this might be the event. So This was miserable. I mean, probably everybody laughing and enthralled by the whole thing. But I do feel sorry for Mark Allen and Rhiannon Evans. Couple, they have a 14-year-old daughter together. They split up in 2008 and they drew each other in the British Open last night. It would seem that relations are still not great. It would seem as well that Mark Allen had Rhiannon Evans removed from the Crucible's practice area when he was warming up for a match, and Evans was working as a pundit, and she is, champion 12 times over, world champion in the women's game, was recently awarded a 2-year tour card on the professional circuit, so now out there competing with men. And of course, the Hearn family sitting at home sipping champagne when this draw was made. I want an investigation into the draw. Actually, this doesn't all add up for me. So Rhiannon Evans, Mark Allen, and so there's anticipation, Dan. This is going to be interesting, and then boy, at the pre-break-off handshake, does it get interesting?
Oh yeah, I mean there was, and you are right. There is a sort of a voyeuristic aspect to it in some respects. Like this is It's sort of there's obviously a very personal story behind it, particularly where, we're talking about a child involved and disputes around.
Don't backtrack now. I text you. You said,
hey,
anything you want to talk about in the news round, and this is the first thing you came up with.
I'm qualifying it before I go on to it. But what I was going to say was, sometimes like some sports, and sometimes the smaller the sport, the industry can close ranks a lot more around these type of things. But with the coverage, to be fair, on ITV4 last night, they weren't shirking the issue. They weren't avoiding it, if you know what I mean. That they were sort of saying, yes, this is an incredible match. Like, this is one of the tensest matches we've ever experienced and encountered. And like Stephen Hendry was was involved in the coverage, and Ken Doherty was speaking after, and they were asked directly about it. So and as you said, the handshake, for people who didn't see it, Mark Allen went up and went for a fist bump and was ignored, and Rhiannon Evans just sort of head down and straight for the table, and it was similar enough afterwards as well. And I know that she made some reference to, with COVID protocols and so on, but there's generally, when you watch the snooker, there's a degree of camaraderie between the players, that there's a nod or a whatever it might be. So like the grudge match was the grudge match, whatever you want to call it. Like, I mean, it was legitimately the case. And when I talk about the documentary was being made when it looked like she was going to win, and in reality, Mark Allen did seem to be falling to pieces for like a top 10, top 12 player. And Richie's more up on his snooker probably than me in terms of the levels, but Mark Allen is a top player and was making bizarre mistakes that you could only attribute to the tension of the situation. There was a great shot at one point, because it was one of these, it's an early round tournament, so there was actually tables, there's just a partition between tables, so there was a game going on, I think, on either side, and you could see a shot of a player, I'm not sure who it was, trying to like peep under the partition to see what was going on, because there was applause after a shot. I think they all knew, and she had some pretty boisterous fans as well. And to be honest, the sadness of the story from her perspective is that she sort of blew it, really. Like, she had the game done and dusted, it was won, and just made one or two little mistakes that the documentary would be made if she'd won. I'm not so sure about the ending, where Mark Allen just sort of crushed her with a sort of amazing break to finish the story. Yeah,
she had one pot to victory and missed it. She was 60 ahead, needed one more red to claim victory, and then it wobbled in the jaw of the pocket, and Allen came through to win. Richie, I suspect you were all over this.
Yeah, shamefully I was unaware of the backstory until I turned it on, and one of the lads happened to mention, like, oh, there's a brilliant backstory to this, and I looked into it, and of course, like Dan mentions, the voyeuristic element of it is almost too much to ignore. And people last night were watching snooker that probably hadn't watched snooker in a long time, and it was all because essentially they were watching a kitchen sink drama play out over a snooker table, and it was just remarkable theatre. Pretty ugly and gruesome, and the human aspect of it isn't pretty at all.
No.
But by God, it drew people in. But like, I'd agree with you there, Joe, on in terms of the draw, because for them to be last match on TV on ITV4 as it was last night, for them to be drawn together in the first round, knowing the story behind the two of them, I would be doubtful that there was a whole element of chance involved in the two of them being drawn together. I think there might have been some jiggery pokery going on there to make sure that it happened, because like, everybody's talking about it today, and everybody's suddenly invested in snooker, and everybody's looking to see who else is going through or going out in the first round of the British Open, which wouldn't be, it is one of the World Snooker Tour events, but it's not necessarily a tentpole for people's sporting viewing throughout the year. But here we are talking about the great drama that unfolded in Leicester, of all places, last night.
Here we are. Mark my words, this is not going to be the last time they're going to be drawn in the first round, I would think. So let's start the news round then. It is, as ever, with thanks to Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. And you're starting, Richie, with James McClean on the move.
Yeah, to lift a story from a certain Cubby reporter from the Irish Independent, the Republic of Ireland winger is poised to join English League One side Wigan Athletic. The 32-year-old's fallen out of favour with his Stoke manager Michael O'Neill. He's been training with the club's under-23s since he reported for Ireland duty against O'Neill's wishes back in March. He's also seen a squad number given away at Stoke, and McClean has played already for 2 seasons at Wigan between 2013 and 2015. He's expected to be at the DW tonight for their League One encounter with Wycombe Wanderers. He won't be involved, of course, but his Stoke contract is going to be cancelled to allow that move.
Sorry, was this a Dan McDonnell exclusive?
So you're addressing that to Richie, or it might have been the case. I mean, I think it had been out in the last couple of days. That I think Wigan were in the mix along with Bolton, but Yeah, it was good. Wigan have actually confirmed it now in the last couple of minutes.
Sorry, because I asked you what you wanted to talk about, and you sent me the very upsetting story of Evans and Allen, which I didn't think was appropriate, and you sent me your Irish independence story. So I just figured.
I mean, it's just that I had an idea it was coming up, but I had an idea it was coming up, but it was like unattributed on the list that I saw. I just wanted to point out. I could maybe talk about this if you wanted to know what was going on.
Okay. I'm only joking. So what's the word here? Why has this gone awry for McClean?
Yeah, listen, I mean, James McClean and Michael O'Neill, the Stoke manager, and ironically enough, I think they had a very good working relationship at the start of his time there, but things have fallen apart, like in terms of their relationship in the last year, big time. And I don't think James McClean's really had an issue with Stoke in terms of his football performance. He actually I think he might have got a supporters player of the season before last. But there was a few issues last year, and probably came to a head around the international window in March, where everyone knows James McClean loves playing for Ireland. I mean, James McClean lives to play for Ireland and was very keen to go and play for Ireland in the international window, which he did.
Oh, I remember this, because I distinctly remember saying to you, I'm reading quotes here from Michael O'Neill saying there's no chance James McClean's going to be fit to play for Ireland anyway.
Yeah, and I think James McClean was always determined to go and did go. And the one thing I would say,
Michael O'Neill clearly.
It did. Now, the one thing I would say about McClean is he did come back and play for Stoke in the first game after the break. So he obviously felt he was well enough to come on in that game. It's not as if he came back from international duty in a wheelchair, and wasn't sort of seen for the rest of the season. He did come back and play in the next game. But, I mean, there was a problem there that presumably was aggravated in some shape or form, because then he was out for a while afterwards. And that it seemed like it was the end of... Well, no, not seemed. I mean, it was. It's the last game he played for Stoke was that game. It's been clear he was going to leave. He had 1 year left in his deal at at Stoke, sorry. So they just needed to obviously organise a sort of a termination and a settlement around that, which was done. And he's gone back to Wigan, dropped down to League One, but somewhere where they've actually got new ownership from Bahrain, and they're desperate to go back up. But he's got a bit of a relationship, as Richie mentioned. He was there for 2 years before. He also donated money to the club last year when they looked like they were going to go bust, effectively. So while James McClean obviously, can be a divisive figure, I think broadly at Wigan, he's going to be unveiled before the game tonight. It's probably one of the grounds where I think he might get a good reception, which wouldn't always been the case at some of the clubs he's played for previously. Yeah,
okay. Still only 32, by the way, McClean. In my head, I feel like he's 2, 3, 4 years older than that. So, for someone who's still trim and probably keeps himself in good nick, there's definitely a few good years left in him from an Irish perspective as well, if he can find some form there. So we'll see how that goes over the coming weeks. And then, Richie, Tammy Abraham.
Yeah, on the other end of the financial scale, Tammy Abraham has completed a €40 million move from Chelsea to Roma. The England striker will link up with his former Chelsea boss Jose Mourinho in the Italian capital. Abraham is seen as a direct replacement for Edin Dzeko, who is himself replacing new Chelsea striker Romelu Lukaku at Inter. Abraham has penned a long-term deal with the Giallorossi, understood to be 5 years in length.
It's an interesting move for Tammy Abraham. Quite like him. See how he goes. Did score 12 goals last year, but once Tuchel came in, barely saw a minute of action. So Jose and Roma, 5-year deal. That's going to be interesting to see how he goes. And then news of a charge in light of the Euro 2020 final.
Yeah, 43-year-old man charged in England in connection with a racist social media post following that Euro 2020 final in July. A police investigation was launched after England footballers, including Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho and Bukayo Saka, all of which missed penalties in the penalty shootout against Italy, became the target of online abuse. Scott McCluskey from Runcorn in Cheshire is to appear in court next month, accused of sending an offensive message by a public communication network.
Okay. Naomi Osaka.
Yeah, the agent of the tennis player is described as Cincinnati Enquirer journalist as a bully. The 4-time Grand Slam winner was reduced to tears in her first press conference in 2 months yesterday. Osaka withdrew from the French Open in May after backing out of media duties on mental health grounds. Following aggressive questioning from Frank Doherty, the 23-year-old had to briefly halt her press conference ahead of the Western and Southern Open, where she's donating indeed all her prize money to the Earthquake Relief Fund in Haiti.
Either of you see this press conference?
Yeah, I saw a bit of it yesterday when it popped up. Sorry, Dan. Yeah, it popped up. It essentially was pressing from Mr. Doherty along the lines of I get the impression he wouldn't be a regular tennis correspondent, etc. But it was along the lines of, you don't really dig like doing all this media duty stuff. And her agent afterwards basically came out with the line that, like, stop being so self-indulgent. Like, players aren't out here simply to justify your, existence and your, job, etc., etc. But yeah, like it's a wobble that I guess she probably didn't need heading into what's going to be the most high-profile tournament outside of the Olympics since she's played at the French Open in that first round match. She's going to be going into the US Open in a week or two's time, which is going to ramp up the pressure even more. It's just something I guess that she didn't need. She felt she had to do. At least to her credit, she came back and she answered as many questions as she could, both in English and in Japanese. So I think every party involved. I know Doherty's written about it again today.
Right.
I will look to put it behind them as quickly as possible.
I watched it, and I'd like to watch it again and just double check. Maybe I'm missing some aspect of his questioning. It didn't jump out to me, I have to say, as overly aggressive or like a journalist going from trying to ask some kind of question of interest to bullying. If the agent of Osaka is calling him a bully, I could see she got upset as it went on. She asked him to repeat the question because she was saying, "Oh, it's interesting. No, it's an interesting point of view." Because I think in effect he was asking from memory. On the one hand, you're very public and you do things in your own channels, and media access is kind of part of that. So how do you balance that? It was something like that. It wasn't a beautifully phrased question. It didn't jump out to me before she answered it as, "Oh, dude, you've crossed a line there." I didn't think it was in that vicinity. I suppose maybe the argument is you have to be very mindful of where she's coming from and super careful at the moment. But I don't know, Dan, if you saw it, but as press conference questions go, it didn't scream to me before she had answered or before she got upset that we were heading that way.
I didn't see it, but it's a hard one to just like wade into it casually because there's layers to it. But the one thing, like those tennis press conferences, and it's almost like some of the golf ones, that they're always like, they're big ones in front of a big room, and it's a difficult arena to ask the type of question you might ask in a sort of a one-on-one chat, as and even a sort of an interview. But sometimes it seems like the format of those is that you have to go that way, and I can understand how it can be maybe overwhelming for the subject if they're speaking in front of a large room of people. I don't know. Yeah. The big difference between a huddle and a open forum press conference sometimes, you know.
And look, watch it again. I could be open to correction. Like I said, it just didn't jump out to me as kind of red flag question, Rich. But it definitely is. They moved on. Then it was by Zoom, and the next journalist, she announced her name and she asked a question, and you could see Osaka was getting upset during the question, and then she kind of lost her composure a little bit. Like that part's very unsettling, where you can see how she is very upset, and that's horrible for everybody. And God, I don't know. I do think if that kind of a question's upsetting her, and the environment is that upsetting to her, I really think they maybe just need to leave her off for a while, Yeah,
it's true of any sports person who I guess wouldn't be the most versed in public speaking. If they don't feel comfortable in the environment, if they don't feel that it's something that they can adequately get through, or that they can properly get through, or they can get through expressing themselves as they wish, then they're probably better off being stepped down from it, no matter the sport, no matter the individual involved.
Have I that wrong, by the way? Did the questions set off alarm bells for you in advance of her getting upset?
No, it was just, what was it, three or four questions in. I think it's like the fourth or fifth. Yeah. And it was I think it was more the fact that it was examining her relationship with the media, and it might have been something like, I don't want to put thoughts in her head, I'm not in a position to do that at all, but it was in a position where she's being asked to, in front of the media, examine and dissect her own relationship with the media and how that is going to be moving forward from a pretty difficult position, which is just 3 months ago and coming off the Olympics, which again was another disappointment after being the torchlighter and then going out pretty early in the tournament over there. Maybe she just doesn't want to speak to the media, and being asked to examine her relationship with media as a whole, as a kind of a broad, big picture subject, was probably not something that she felt at all comfortable with yesterday. I just don't think she had the personality to do it.
No, I don't think so. Like, maybe you could say there was a touch of, like, you want your cake and to eat it too, like, you'll do media on your terms but not on ours. Maybe that was like, there was a touch maybe of that on the underbelly of the question, but I hadn't anticipated her getting so upset with the answers. So anyway, the press conference is available. Anyone can watch it. It's all over the internet, as you might imagine. Do you want to give us a last story, Rich, whatever one you fancy?
Yeah. Sligo Rovers, they've signed Andre Wright until the end of the season. This striker scored 8 goals in 17 Premier Division matches last season, while with Bohemians, who's also named in the Team of the Year and staying with the League of Ireland as well. Less than a fortnight after offering them their full support, Athlone Town have parted company with manager Adrian Carberry after a bright start to the First Division. They've won just one of their last 10 games. Paul Doolan, according to your man there in the other box, is one of the front runners to succeed Carberry at Lissy Woolham.
Another exclusive, Dan.
Well, he's in the frame. I'm not shouting from the rooftops about it, but just a journalist doing his job, doing news stories on a Tuesday afternoon, Joe. Like, we're gonna have to make a living somehow.
Don't call him a hero. Don't call him a hero.
No, just delivering letters like a postman.
Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent, thank you.
Thank you.
Richie McCormack, thank you.
Nice one.
We're with Conor McKeown and Declan Bogue after 8 o'clock talking Dublin. Up next, we're talking Irish basketball.